Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing the Rocketeer from Funko Games. The Rocketeer is a two-player head-to-head game in which you are playing with asymmetric sides as you try to get as many finale points as possible throughout the course of the game. The basic round structure in this game, what you're trying to do for the most part is you're trying to get your hands on these cards, these finale cards, that will all give you a variety of different points, some of them direct points, some of them variable points depending on certain conditions that are achieved, and so you're trying to get your hands on these cards as much as you possibly can because that's going to be your biggest source of points. To do that, there's a variety of things going on here, but as far as the round structure itself, every single round what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and draw an event card. You're going to look at the event card, and depending on the number of blimps over here, you're going to move this Hindenburg, or whatever it is, as many spaces as you have here. Almost all the cards will show 1, but there are some that have 2 and some that have 0 on them, so that gives you a degree of uncertainty as you go through the game as far as exactly when the game will end. And so you're slowly moving around this, each of these being around, and again it could be 2 or 0 or most of the time 1, and eventually when we get to Los Angeles that will be the last round of the game. So in other words, generally 6 rounds, although that's not exactly certain. It could be 5, it could be 7, and it's generally going to be roughly 6 rounds for the game. In each round, what you're going to do is you're going to have a hand of cards. Like I said already, this is an asymmetric 2-player head-to-head game, and you're going to have both different sides, each of them with different styles as far as how they go, but you're going to have your own hand of cards. You're going to have a hand of 7 cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're going to utilize your cards to drive your actions on your turn. The player with the plans, which starts off over here with Cliff with the Rocketeer having the plans, the player with the plans will take the first turn in this game, and the way a turn works is you go ahead and choose a character to activate. You'll have the circle, the hexagon, and the square, which are specific characters. You're going to have Peavy and Cliff and Jenny over here. And on the other side, you'll have Lothar, you'll have Neville, and you'll have Eddie. But you're going to go ahead and utilize these cards and activate those characters. So the way it works is you pick a character. So let's say we pick Peavy over here. We'll flip his marker. This is going to be Peavy's activation. But now, as soon as we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and take any cards that don't have a circle, put them to the back. Don't actually do that. That will show people what's going on. I'm just showing you in your case. So this card is only a hexagon. That card is only a square. We can't use them to activate Peavy. Versus these cards on their banner, we have 3 that are only for Peavy, and then 2 that can be used for a variety of characters, including Peavy, and we decide how we want to activate our cards. Basically, you have a hand of cards, each team does, and you're trying to figure out what combination of cards you want to activate for each character as you go through the game. Now, when you activate a card, you're either going to be activating the left-hand side for the symbols, basically this side over here, or the right-hand side, paying in any clout that you need to pay in order to go ahead and do the ability over here. So for example, a very common action might be go ahead and discard this to move 1 and take 1 clout. So right now we'll go ahead and find Peavy, who has a circle base, making things easy. We'll move him 1, which will move over here. We'll take the location action, which means we'll gather a clout for our team. And then because this will give us an additional clout, we'll go ahead and take an additional clout, and that's our card. It goes to the discard pile, and that's 1 card played. Now we still have 2 more cards that are only good for Peavy, so we may as well use those. There are some situations in which you won't, but generally you'll want to use all those cards for the character you're activating if they are dedicated to that character. And again, we'll go ahead and we'll do another searching action. This time we'll go ahead and move down over here to this location, and we're going to go ahead and take the location action, which has us draw a card. So we have another card we can add to our hand, and then we're going to go ahead and again gain a clout, which is a team resource. That's another card gone. And then we have one more card over here. We have this one over here, which this one lets us pay. This time we're going to go ahead and activate the right-hand side, where we're going to pay in a clout. That's the cost. We're going to discard the top card of our deck, and if it shows a circle, which it sadly does not, then we would have gone ahead and drawn a finale card as well as advanced the Rocketeer token. Sadly, it didn't have those, and so we can't actually do those. So we didn't get to draw that ability, so we're done over there. Let's go ahead and put the Rocketeer token on, speaking of which, if we can grab this, putting it over here. And that is basically how a turn is going to activate in the game. You're going to choose a character, you're going to activate any cards you want that match that character. The other team's going to go ahead and activate their side as well, and you're going to go back and forth alternate your characters until all sides have activated all 3 characters, and that will basically be a round. Once all sides are done activating, once they've all gone through the cards, their characters are all activated, you're going to look to see who controls different locations. The way control works is whenever you have different amounts of characters at a location, you see who has the most characters at a location, and that side will get the location benefit. So for example, Sinclair Mansion right now is controlled by this side, 1 versus nothing, so they'll go ahead and get this benefit from that location. Over here, the Bulldog Cafe is controlled controlled by over here, by Jenny over here, and she'll control this location, getting the benefit of drawing an extra card at the end of the round. This middle location has 2 and 2, but right now Cliff is knocked out, so he will not count towards it, which means they'll get the benefit of this location. In general, we haven't really talked about knocking out, we haven't really talked about combat, but in general, throughout the course of locations, most of what you have in locations is fairly simple. So for example, we have over here, we have gaining clout as location actions, we have gaining grit, which is effectively character's health and is used for fighting. You can discard grit to power up attacks, and you need grit to defend against attacks. We have more clout, we have drawing extra cards, more grit, and more clout. Whenever you go to 1635 Palm Terrace, you'll draw an extra card, and those are the location actions. As far as the location benefits, the observatory is going to let you, this icon depends on whether you have the plans or not. You can either hide the plans, or you can reveal an opponent's plan card. You can draw you can grab 3 clout. This is dependent on the side, but either a clout and an additional clout if you have the plans, or a soldier, that's going to be a little recruited soldier token, which we haven't really talked about here, or another recruited soldier if you have the plans. Over here you'll gain grit, over here you'll draw an extra card, and over here you'll have a jetpack movement. If you're the Rocketeer, you'll be able to move your jetpack up 1, 2 if you have the plans, and then getting a clout and another one if you have the plans. That goes to a few things in the game we haven't really heavily talked about, one of which is the concept of the plans. Whenever you knock out a character, you're going to go ahead, so for example, Cliff over here is knocked out. When that happened, you'd reveal this card, and sure enough, Cliff had the plans. You can see these other characters have little X's on the cards. Whenever you knock out a character, you're going to try to see who has the plans, and if you knock out the character with the plans, then your team steals the plans, which is very helpful because that will mean you draw an extra finale card at the end of the round, so you're trying to have the plans when and where possible. But you're trying to play a little bit of a bluffing game of who has the plans, when they have the plans, and all of that as you try to hide who has the plans in this game. As far as attacking actions, we briefly talked about it. The general idea is characters are going to have grit, which you'll discard to power up attacks, along with certain attack cards in your hand. They'll have the option to go ahead and have an attack action. Let's see if we can find, here we go, this little tussle action. You'll have strength 1 or 2 tussles you can play. You can augment that with grit, and your opponent can defend it with grit, or possibly with shield cards matching the character icon from their hand as well. So you're going to go back and forth trying to be mindful of that. Additionally, another thing you're going to be doing in the course of the game is you're going to, whenever you have this card drawn, this card tells you which location, in this case the Bulldog Cafe, is also going to be the spot where you want to go if you want to draw an extra finale card every single round. And that is basically what is happening in this game. You're going back and forth every single round. You're going to be drawing extra cards. You're going to be trying to balance which characters you activate and when. You're going to be trying to go to different locations and tussle with characters, trying to balance your grit against their grit, trying to figure out when you can press an advantage. What cards do you have in your hand? Do you want to start with a powered up character to take down your opponents, or do you want to save your powered up character for last so you can actually have the final say? There's a lot of back and forth as you try to manage your hand, manage your characters, try to hide the plans, navigate around that, and try to figure out which locations, which control of which locations will ultimately give you the win in the Rocketeer. And that's basically it. That's the game, which brings us to the review, starting off with ease of play. Overall, the game is very easy to dive into. Rulebook's very easy, very short. This is the entire thing over here. We don't have a lot going on. You know, it's 8-9 pages, and most of it is very easy to go through. Short and easy to teach, easy to play. The game itself runs a little long for the experience it gives. We'll come back to that in the review part of things. Runs around 45 minutes, which isn't that long, but tends to feel a bit repetitive. I'm diving into review stuff. We'll come back to this later. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, first of all, off the bat, I generally like the card activation for multiple characters, especially the fact that you have a whole bunch of cards in this deck that are activated for multiple characters, giving you a sense of agency of which character at which point do you want to activate with using which set of cards. You're going to draw a starting hand of 7 cards. You may draw more cards as you go through the experience, but it does give you a sense of control as you figure out how you're going to plan your turns based on which character has what, which character has the plans, where the character's situated, what sequence or activation you want to take. Are you going first or last? There's a lot of balance around how you try to play out what sequence of card activations is going to best reward you in the game, and that's one of the main decision spaces you're playing with. And then the tug of war of various locations. You wander from location to location. As you wander to one location because it might give you this benefit, you wander to that location because you want the instant action. You want to draw extra cards over here. You want to go to that spot so you can draw that extra finale card, because this game can come down to who has one more finale card than the other player at the end of it. And so there's this constant tug of war between them. And then there's the asymmetric size, which we didn't heavily go into, but generally over here, the Rocketeer is going to have this rocket that is slowly moving up this track, which is both going to give him greater maneuverability than any other character, but additionally other cards are going to modify based on the rocket. You're going to have attacks you can make that are based on the strength of the rocket. You'll have scoring cards that are based on the strength of the rocket. And so moving your rocket up and getting that extra degree of edge in the game can absolutely be impactful. Meanwhile, you have your recruited soldiers over here, and eventually you can trigger ambushes where you're going to start placing soldiers down on the board, which will give you a larger sense of area control, but you have to go ahead and trigger those those ambush cards and pay 3 clout to do so, and each side is therefore playing with a slightly asymmetric adjustment to how they are stronger than the player, how they have an advantage over the other side as they try to figure out going for Sinclair Mansion, going for the Chapelle Airfield, going for whatever location has that extra finale token so you can get those extra finale cards. There's a bunch of things you're trying to juggle as you play through the Rocketeer. As far as what I don't like in the game, the first thing I touched upon this already is it runs a little long for the experience it provides. I find that the Rocketeer is a game that plays excellently in around half an hour, except most of my games of the Rocketeer have been over half an hour. I wonder the box itself doesn't even tell me as far as the box. It should say somewhere over here, not the side of the box. Ages 12, 2 players. I'm not seeing maybe the back of the box. Let's see if the back of the box has it. Back of the box does not. 45 minutes. The box is accurate to the playtime. 45 minutes is roughly how long the Rocketeer takes. The only problem is I find that the gameplay is a little bit repetitive for that 45-minute length. This is a game that I think would have benefited from being a round or two shorter and possibly having things powered up a bit more to give you that space to achieve the same amount of things but in a shorter playtime. I find the gameplay loop is just a drop too repetitive for a 45-minute long game, and so I find that overall, while I enjoy the Rocketeer, it does slightly overstay its welcome. Secondly, is you have this +1 draw location, which I find is often a bit of a crutch as players constantly go to this location because it will give you that extra draw. If you're expending a card to move to that location and draw a grit, well, you're effectively replacing your card, but also getting the grit, which means more often than not, and strategic players might, tell me how I'm doing this all wrong, but in general, we found on our games, most players would frequently find themselves drawn to 1635 Palm Terrace in order to get that extra card draw because the economy seemed to pay off, and the cyclical nature of drawing extra cards while still getting in your attack or your grit or your clout, whatever it is, while drawing extra cards often paid itself off. Not always, because you're trading in a degree of what you can predict around versus a degree of randomness, but more often than not, it was a drawn to location across the course of the game. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, the very nature of the plans. At the end of the day, you do have this kind of guesswork as far as where the plans are. Yes, there's absolutely bluffing and double think as far as where you're going to hide the plans, who's the strongest character, who has the more grit, who's further away from other things, and then therefore double bluffing. Sure, there's all these mind games you can play, but ultimately you're going to have that picking a character and hoping for the best, and if you don't like that bluffing mechanic, this may not be the best game for you because it definitely is present, and a player who's constantly guessing correctly where the plans are will certainly have a better experience than a player who's knocking out 2 or 3 people to get to the plans. And speaking of knocking people out, you may not like the fact that the combat in this game is basically, hey, attack 2 and then we each expend extra grit to get to the other player, which starts off great when you have a lot of grit, but very quickly devolves into just slugging people in the face. You may find that combat system less rewarding than, well, most games with combat systems. As far as final thoughts on the Rocketeer, overall I enjoy what the Rocketeer is doing. Overall I enjoy the back and forth. It has that very Cosmos 2-player feel as far as a back and forth head-to-head game with a degree of tension as far as what you're trying to do, how you're trying to gather points, where you're trying to get them, how you manage your hand. The Rocketeer does a lot of things very well, and it gives you it gives you a solid sense of, like, good guys versus bad guys as you try to outwit each other and gather those plans, and it really did an overall good job on the game experience. For me, my biggest con is the fact that I find the game does run longer than the experience it provides, and so it's one that for me, after a few plays, I kind of felt like I just wanted the same game but in a shorter experience. Overall, one that I enjoyed, but one that does outstay its welcome a bit. A 3.5 out of 5 for me. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Tarji. Tarji is going to be an excellent worker placement 2-player head-to-head game, which you really do try to get in each other's ways, you manage resources, and a game that also runs for 45 minutes, but I think has a little bit more going on as far as the variability of the experience. And then if you're looking for a real tug-of-war, Watergate is one of my go-to 2-player tug-of-war experiences. Another 45-minute-ish long game, but with a whole lot of strategy back and forth and head-to-head card play going on in it. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this review, and as always, I hope you have a good one.